I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Ishan Bhaidani, CEO of SCRIB3. Ishan, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ashton.
You're very welcome. Excited to dive into all the exciting news in the crypto markets today and what's happened this year. I feel like this is the kickoff of a huge year for blockchain adoption in crypto, and I know you're deep in the weeds in it, and you have some knowledge to share. I would love to start our conversation off by, first of all, just hearing a little bit more about your background in blockchain and SCRIB3 and everything else that you have been working on.
Yeah, would love to. I started off, previously I was in private equity. I had my own PE fund. My brother and I used to run. Caught the DeFi bug in 2019, had some friends show me the early blue chip stuff, Maker, Aave, ETH, Compound, etc. And, it was just very intuitive for me. I just picked up DeFi before I even understood the backend infra of, Ethereum and, smart contract platforms and things like that. And so I just got incredibly interested, started to do, my, 1,000 hours of research, how does this stuff work? How do these platforms, like how can you have this kind of decentralized trust? Why are so many people putting billions and billions of dollars up on these platforms? And then, started to do all the digging and research, went through DeFi Summer, ended up doing pretty well for myself in DeFi Summer, like most people who were in that time did. It was a little hard not to. And then, kind of built that conviction that this was, in my opinion, still is, kind of the future of finance, where this will be kind of the back end infrastructure for all financial activity in the future. Mm-hmm. And, started to realize that, hey, if this is this is just the perfect culmination of things I was always interested in, right? Whether it was like philosophy, economics, finance, governance, et cetera. I think like politics is actually like a very underrated piece of, some of the things like I think we're also front running the history of politics in some respects. And so, started to build that conviction, realized that if you wanted to, there's potentially an opportunity to build kind of a career in this space. Mm-hmm. And so, started contributing around ecosystems a lot, worked at another kind of agency in the space, and then, started contributing a lot of different DeFi platforms, contributed, spent a little bit of time at, Redacted Cartel, spent a lot of time at Gains Network and like the perpdex space. And then, just kind of made this realization that there was a massive white space and just a supply demand gap of people that really understood the core use cases of the technology and like the underpinnings of how this stuff works, how it ticks, what the value prop is, and, how to kind of take some of this stuff to market, right? How to, eloquently talk about the value prop of this technology. Mm-hmm. And so that was a little bit of the thesis around starting SCRIB3. So, the mm-hmm. thesis was really, there's white space here to work on and build the most technical, the more technical crypto native go-to-market stuff in the space. No one was really doing it at a super high level. Constantly projects would come up to us as we were working on Gains Network and other projects that it's like, hey, you guys are doing really well here. Like, can you guys help us out? And then just realized that there was just a kind of opportunity there to grow.
Wow. It's incredible and amazing timing on joining in right at the beginning of DeFi, which is the start, I believe, as well of revolutionizing the entire financial sector, trillions of dollars to get in, almost on day one, and be so passionate that you just like doing it. It's just like, as you said, it sort of touches on revolutionizing and all of these different industries. It's not just one thing. It changes everything, it's just so cool. And, all of that knowledge leading up to, it's sort of an entrepreneur's journey. People are coming to you, hey, we need help. And you're like, hey, I should start SCRIB3 to solve this exact problem that I keep seeing in the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think the point about there's a piece of the space for everybody, right? Whatever your passion is, whether it's gaming, it's crypto, it's economics, it's finance, it's governance and politics, it's coordination, like there's a piece of the space for everybody, and I think that's incredibly powerful, which is a big piece of the thesis, right? Is like if you can touch so many different areas and revolutionize so many different sectors of of people's lives, it's kind of hard to not be incredibly bullish. And I think one thing is that I've seen is like, you can have like still traditional business models in this space. There's a lot of opportunities. Podcasting is a traditional Web2 business model, right? That doesn't mean it's not available to be used. Like, I think a lot of people just kind of sometimes over-index on the need to do these like, new types of business models where you have, fee mechanisms on these like immutable smart contract platforms and I think there's still a massive opportunity and need for traditional style businesses, right? Like agencies, and, like podcasting, media. And as you see, some of like the most successful private businesses in the space still are and look very much like traditional businesses. And so I think more people should lean into that, accounting models, law firms, there's plenty of need to just take a lot of these traditional models that don't necessarily, you don't need a DAO to do an agency. You don't need a DAO to do a law firm or something like that. I mean, those concepts are cool, and I think there's things to be explored there, but I don't think that's the first place people need to think. There's still a ton of opportunity to build traditional businesses, and that was something, I've always been passionate about. Building businesses my whole life. My family comes from a retail entrepreneurial background, so it's like I've just been doing business for a long time, saw the opportunity. There's still plenty more opportunity out there, and so I think that's just an area that people under-index on a little bit.
No, I think that's a great point, Ishan. Most of the biggest businesses in blockchain, they're not completely on the blockchain. If you're a new company and you're looking at ways to implement blockchain to innovate in the company, you can just do something small to start, and the traditional business is still the core of the business. Binance and Coinbase, they're not, a full DEX on the blockchain with smart contracts. They're a traditional business supporting people to get into Web3, and even gaming. The games themselves, the ones that are built completely on the blockchain, I don't think we're ready for that yet. Maybe in the future, but just the tokenization of the assets and finding other ways to bring value with blockchain in traditional gaming, I think is the stepping stone we need right now to provide a lot more value. Same with agencies, law firms, accounting, as you mentioned. I would love to hear a little bit more about yourself in SCRIB and what you and your team have built in SCRIB. What exactly are the main offerings that you guys are giving and providing value for in the blockchain space right now?
Yeah. So we started SCRIB with kind of three people, completely bootstrapped the company, and we started in November of 22, which is, as many know, probably one of the not so great times to kind of invest in starting a business. We spent 2023 kind of scaling up. We started with three people. Now we're a team of about getting close to 60 full-time heads.
Wow.
We think it's just a testament to product market fit. When we have these conversations with teams about their kind of go-to-market needs, they really resonate with the fact that we're incredibly native. We really understand the space. You don't have to explain to us the core competencies of your business. We understand the landscape, who your competitors are, and all that, all kind of what we think of as table stakes. And then we can get into the more nuanced conversations about, what is the actual go-to-market strategy? How are we thinking about, token launches, and how are we thinking about kind of continuing to build a business over the next, 1, 3, 5 years? And so, there's 6 areas of the business that we focus on. We do content for projects, right? Everything from technical documentation to your, blog posts, educational content, product updates, things like that. We run social at scale. We think that that's the top distribution mechanism in the space, right? How do people learn about projects? It's through social, right? And even more specifically, it's through Twitter for the most part. And I think now you're starting to see the growth of some of these decentralized platforms like Lens, Farcaster, Blue Sky, things like that. Like, it's definitely something that's important to keep an eye on, but that's where your top of funnel distribution happens, right? That's how people learn about projects. And then we also do public relations. We feel incredibly confident. We have the most native public relations team in the space, where you can, use public relations as a mechanism to build narrative, right? Help talk about the nuance of the project and, why it's better than, competitors in the space and things like that. We also do design, community development, and business development. Community and business development. So 6 areas we focus on. There's a lot of other areas we're looking to grow into. We just think that, again, teams really resonate with the crypto nativity of it. We really get it. We understand it. We're thought partners. We're not just teams that come in and complete tasks. We think of ourselves when we work with projects as, we're core contributors to the team. We want to be treated as such. We want to have that type of impact. And so we don't want to be treated as this agency that's outside looking in with a hand away. We want to be integrated just like you would bring on a new member of the team, a new group of people, a new cohort. We have those same expectations about how we work with teams. And that's what's helped us work with, some of the coolest, most interesting teams in the space. We work with everyone from, we do every stage of the life cycle. We work with everyone from pre-seed projects. We work with some of the largest teams in the space, like a Uniswap Foundation, Wormhole, Axelar, on and on. So we probably work with just a dozen projects in the top 200 of market cap. 30 teams at any given time. And it's fun to be able to get into the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, understand how these teams are thinking about things, where they see the space. I think there's a ton of it's just really cool to be able to pick people's brains and see how these teams are building, where they see the future. We work across, we work in the Solana ecosystem. We work a ton in the EVM ecosystem. We work in the cross-chain, messaging, Cosmos ecosystem in the IBC as well. And so you start to see the different theologies or the different, the different theses these teams have about where the space is going, whether it's modular or monolithic, or how all of these different ecosystems are going to kind of work together or interact with each other as the space continues to develop. I think we're still so nascent, right? This entire industry is 10, 12, 13 years old as a whole, 14 years old if you're really stretching it. There's just so much more to develop. I think anyone that has incredible conviction, that tells you 100% that this is where the world is going, is frankly is frankly wrong. Like, I don't think anyone, the smart, we chat with some of the smartest minds in the space, and even these guys who are building these innovative applications, L1s, L2s, some of the largest applications, even these guys don't know. They're just like, yeah, we're going to build for where we think it's going, but we're going to be nimble enough and, have enough grace to understand that we're not always going to be right. And, we're going to have to be nimble enough to pivot as things change.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, Ishan, about it. Crypto moves so fast too, and you just never know when one upgrade of a protocol or one part of the blockchain that gets better changes everything. Whether it's new programming languages coming in and getting involved, which I've seen in the recent videos that we've done, just more innovations in the space. Being able to pivot your startup is of utmost importance, and there's no shame in being not 100% right on the narrative when you first start the company, because if you stick to that, it will die. You need to pivot to survive. And I like what you said about the positioning of Scribe in actually being inside of inside of the team, and not just somebody that's helping on the side. When I was running a startup personally, I realized the utmost importance that's needed for the developers to be in-house, or the CTO to be a co-founder, to have that technical expertise inside of the company. Because once you try to hire externally and you have them at arm's reach, and something goes wrong or you need to pivot, it is just a hassle. It's good to be in the team. So I'm glad to hear that you and your team are working so closely with these companies.
Yeah, I think I can give you a really good example. One of the things that I think is really cool about, the position that I get the opportunity to do, which is, I get to meet with teams that are building at the forefront of this every single day. And one of the cool things is we're just a little more upstream than a traditional venture capital firm, where, typically we're working with teams that have already raised capital, right? That already have a little bit of the cosign from some of the top venture capital firms and minds in the space. And so whereas VCs are still trying to kind of separate the noise from the signal, we get a pretty good idea of the signal because these guys already have that cosign. And so we start to get a little bit of, not this long-term vision like venture capital firms do of like, what are these things going to look like in 5 or 10 years? But it's a little on a shorter timeline where it's like, hey, these teams have raised, they've built product, and they're ready to go to market, and they need that support. And so we get a little bit of a shorter view into what do things look like in the next 1 to 2 years, and not necessarily what do things have to theorize about what things could possibly be over a 5 or 10 year horizon. So like, I think a really great example is like, we're seeing a ton of Bitcoin layer twos right now, and the growth of Bitcoin DeFi. Now, I think traditionally you would think that, like the Bitcoin layer twos are like stacks, and, these things are incredibly slow moving technologies. These are not incredibly efficient, but I think, as technology grows, you're starting to see the realistic use of zero knowledge proofs, and the ability to create succinct proofs in order to scale a Bitcoin layer 2 that could actually create real application layers. So people are now building layer 2s that are perfectly built for a ton of DeFi applications, gaming applications, other things like that. And so I think traditionally, if you told people this 6 months or 8 months ago, they'd be like, oh, Bitcoin L2s are never going to take off. It's never going to be fast enough. But now, being able to build really succinct proofs, and, even the advent of things like, FHE, fully homomorphic, encryption, like this is going to create new scaling opportunities. And so you just have to be nimble enough to understand that hey, you don't know where these things are going to go. You don't know what massive innovations can be created in order to unlock new opportunities. And I definitely think that there's definitely going to be a market of people who really think that, if I can have the true security of the most decentralized physical infrastructure network, which is Bitcoin, and just have these, worldwide access to nodes to secure my network, that is potentially safer for things like large scale DeFi lending operations, right? If you want to build a money market, I mean, I'm I wouldn't say an EVM maxi, but I'm incredibly bullish on the EVM, but it's a real narrative and it's a really interesting space. So like, you just have to be nimble enough to understand that new things can come up every day, and the speed at which this industry changes is just it's a feature, not a bug. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and great insights there into Bitcoin. I feel like Bitcoin is some maxis that just see Bitcoin as the store of value or the digital gold may not like it, but there is more utility coming into Bitcoin because of these other innovations, as you say, whether ZK or layer twos that popped up, and hey, this can work with Bitcoin as well. Bitcoin is the strongest blockchain network. It has the most value locked in. It is the hardest blockchain of them all, and adding that value onto the Bitcoin network, I think is going to open up a lot of opportunities for decentralized finance, as you said. If you need to move trillions of dollars from the stock market, might as well do it on the hardest, most secure blockchain that there is.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
And you also mentioned at the beginning about when you started Scribe, it was sort of in the depths of the bear market, November 22, and that was the same month that all hell broke loose on FTX. I actually saw you across socials and in the news beforehand. It looked like you were one of the first people waving the red flag on FTX, and having that you had the winning lottery numbers there to guess that there was something wrong. Can you talk about what you saw? What was the story leading up to the FTX crash, and sort of how it all played out in your eyes?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, definitely a little bit of a winning lottery ticket for myself. I think it definitely changed the trajectory of Scribe, my personal career, and a lot of other factors. So definitely a fun story to talk about. I think I've obviously been contributing around and working really closely in DeFi for quite a long time, and there was a few factors that started to pique my interest as to, there's probably something not super great going on here. I think, and a lot of it are not like this incredibly complex. I think with CeFi institutions, it's you're not able to do a lot of the traditional just like on-chain analytical aspect of it. And so it's hard to really know the solvency of a project when a lot of the funds are like in bank accounts and in traditional, financial rails. But I think there was a couple of factors that I saw that really raised my eyebrow and made me think that something is not right there. I think one of the first things I saw was just the departure of top executives. I think you saw, man, it's been so long now. It's like even hard to remember. Sam Trabucco. There it is.
Yeah.
So you saw Sam Trabucco leave in like I want to say like May or June of 2022. You saw him leave, and I think there's a fair argument to be made that maybe he just became post-economic, right? And I think honestly, like you talk about top signals, there is no better top signal than Sam Trabucco, because now he just gets off scot-free for what is likely to be involved in some capacity to some of the things that happened at FTX, but he got it at the right time. But being the CIO of, and I guess co-CEO at the time of Alameda, him leaving at what thought to be the best business in the world at the time, and the fastest growing startup in probably history, red flag, right? You're just making money hand over fist. People would always talk about how the scale of the trades that these guys were making, and the arbs they were making, and how they were just killing people in DeFi, which they were, right? There's on-chain proof that they were killing people. And so if they're making so much money hand over fist, why is this guy leaving? Yeah, I think there's a fair point. Maybe he's post-economic, goes to buy a boat somewhere, live on an island. Sure, right? But I think what really doubled that down was you had FTX US CEO Brett Harrison, who actually just raised money for Architect. He left in September, and this was supposed to be the adult in the room, right? He was supposed to be this like TradFi titan who comes in and is going to fix all the kids and rally up the troops and build this really strong infrastructure to be able to scale FTX to $100 billion company. And he left, maybe even it was definitely under a year because he hadn't even hit his vest period, right? And so it's like if you're going to leave a company before you're vesting, where it's like, traditional startups, you have a 1 year cliff and then you start to vest over, maybe like a linear, quarterly linear vesting period. Massive red flag, right? You have a $30 billion business that you're potentially vesting into. Why are you leaving right before your vest period hits? So then that was like like something fishy here, right? And I was contributing really heavily to Gains Network at the time, which was a top two perpetual futures DEX. Right after GMX, Gains was by far and away number two in volume behind those two. And so, it started to realize that, one, this was like post Luna, right? So volume across the board is going down pretty significantly, right? And also another thing, kind of even going before, is that I just had incredible conviction that there was going to be a massive domino to fall post Luna, right? You can't burn 60 billion in market cap in like a week's time period and not have, like 3AC, sure, like pretty big, but we're not talking about $10 billion or $20 billion in like assets going poof, right? You're talking about like, yeah, Celsius, like decent sized business, but like the actual value of that business was not that massive, maybe a billion, maybe 2 billion, right? There was a couple small dominoes, but I I have an incredible conviction that there was a big domino that was going to fall, right? $60 billion is Lehman size, right? And so you're comparing it to like the 2008 financial crisis, a ton of massive businesses. You're talking about AIG and some of the largest businesses in the world started to go under. So I was definitely looking at what was like who was going to be the most at risk, right? Who is really involved in that ecosystem? Who is playing around in Luna a ton? And so one of those players that wasn't just a regular size hedge fund like a 3AC, someone was going to go down. So my my senses, my spidey senses were already tingling. Um, and so then Brett Harrison leaves. I working at Gains, I saw that the entire derivative space like CeFi and DeFi were going down, but actually the on-chain derivative market share was increasing. And then you start to look at FTX volumes around that time, they're actually decreasing, but you still see these incredible spend levels, right? You see the money that they're spending, the people that they're bringing on. You start to hear some of these stories about this big Bahamas mansion, and then that's when I started to do kind of the really deep due diligence of like, hey, what's really going on here? How are these numbers adding up? Like something just wasn't adding up. Yeah, they raised a decent amount of money, but like at a $30 billion valuation, they raised like a billion, a few billion. They weren't raising 10 billion at a $30 billion valuation. So they didn't have this like ungodly war chest. They had a war chest, but spending $20 million a year on Miami Heat naming rights for the FTX arena, Sam's talking about investing in Twitter and helping Elon buy Twitter. Talking about the political contributions he's making, taking the eye off the ball. They just ended up missing on a lot of product launches, right? They tried to do FTX stocks, which was just like, it was totally against everything they were talking about. Like the rhetoric was always, we're going to be incredibly native, we're going to be crypto, like we're going to, be this intersection of crypto and TradFi, and like, the what they were saying and the actions they were taking didn't match, and it started to seem like cash grabs, right? FTX NFT dumped a bunch of money into that absolute like total zero, absolute like just terrible product. And so you start to put together, it's like, hey, they're dumping a bunch of money into product launches. These aren't working. They're dumping a bunch of money into marketing. It's not really working too well. And then their overall core business, the volume is going down. And then you have like this, what percentage of the volume that they're actually doing is Alameda versus everybody else. And the issues there, but it's like, maybe Alameda really is just killing everybody, and this business is making $100 million a year. Even if Alameda is making $100 million a year, you're talking about, a multi-billion-dollar company that's, spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year in, they had a massively bloated payroll, all of that. And so you start to put all of these pieces together, and I just got this incredible conviction that like this was the big domino that was going to drop post Luna. And then I put out this relatively long thread on Twitter around October, and just laid it out of like, hey, this is why I'm pretty bearish on everything these guys have happening. And something isn't right here, something doesn't make sense. And then at the time, I kind of got killed for it, right? People were like, hey, these guys are destroying everybody on chain. Look at the on chain metrics, like, the kimchi trade and some of these other ARB opportunities they're getting. But it's like, hey, we're talking about like, peanuts versus like, like this massive $30 billion business. Like you're talking about like picking up pennies in front of a steamroller, right? They're like, yeah, they're doing a couple arbs here, there, but these numbers just aren't adding up. And I have texts from people that are like, hey, like sending me screenshots of people being like, this guy's crazy, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And then a month later, like felt pretty vindicated.
Yeah, no, amazing story, and I think that's exactly how it goes when you're a contrarian like that, but you have a hunch. And there's bound to be people that they have a vested interest in it working, and there still are many accounts that they hopefully the recovery happens eventually. But yeah, that's calling the bottom, and that really was the bottom. We've turned around so much since then throughout 2023 in the latter half. Bitcoin just was on fire. And moving into 2024, it seems like there was a small dip buying after the Bitcoin ETF launched, but the amount of volume that's happened with TradFi coming in to Bitcoin, buying billions and billions, they need it for the back in the ETF. It's seen a 180-degree turn, and usually that's what happens in these cycles is it gets to the depths of the bear. And then I feel like this one, we're still pretty early on in what's coming up in the next cycle for Bitcoin and for crypto altogether, because I don't know if it's proper to say this time feels different because there's bigger companies. I'm sure they'll be bound to be funny business as well, but when the biggest financial companies in the world are getting involved, I feel like it's a little bit different. Do you have optimism on moving forward post Bitcoin ETF, potentially Ethereum, other coin ETF, and just the crypto market in general moving forward 2024, 25?
I think everybody's underweight ETH right now. I think it's going to be so obvious in hindsight. I think you're starting to see the movement for it. I think you have a lot of ETH being sucked up in the market. You have, like I'm one of the biggest eigenlayer bulls you will ever meet. I think like just the concept of being able to export decentralized trust is a massive, massive primitive that we're still not able. I think even the eigenlayer team hasn't even been able to wrap their heads around all of the different opportunities. I think there's going to be consumer opportunities. I think it's going to be a real 0 to 1 innovation, just full stop, like just real actual innovation, like on mass scale. But I think you have 4844 coming, proto dank sharding. That's going to be pretty massive. That's going to make gas fees a lot cheaper. It's going to really open the door for for more retail to find it realistic to use a lot of these layer 2 networks. And I think you're starting to see a lot more exchanges and on-rampings going directly to L2s. I think it's going to hit a point where, if you interacted with ETH layer 1, it's going to be kind of like oh shit, you used to trade on ETH L1. Wow, it's like that's impressive where you were early. I think you have 4844, you have eigenlayer, and just all of the LRTs and eigenlayers just eating so much Ethereum off of the market. I think you have Blast and other kind of things like this that are just eating market share. And then you have this like giant behemoth elephant in the room, which is the Ethereum ETF. I think one of the things that people in the market is probably not pricing in properly is that you can't stop an ETF anymore. There is no ability. I think once you start to get to like Solana and like down the rabbit hole like that, I think there's arguments to be made about centralization. But I think the Bitcoin, like the verdicts that have happened on the Bitcoin ETF are going to be so easily played out in court for an Ethereum ETF that it's essentially a done deal now. Like there is nothing that is going to stop anybody from launching an Ethereum ETF. I think May might be a little bit exciting, like it might be a little bit optimistic, but I think like Q3, it'd be hard to see we don't get an Ethereum ETF before Q3, Q4, and once that happens, the inflows you're going to see are just going to be incredible. So you have 4844 Denkun. You're going to have a massive, like it's just going to be easier and cheaper and cleaner to use the Ethereum network. I think you have this entire supply section where like I don't think eigenlayer like full on mainnet and withdrawals are going to happen for probably a quarter or two, right? So all of that ETH is just getting sucked up, Blast, other platforms like that. And then, you have an ETF that comes and the excitement around the ETF. So there's just going to be a massive underweight supply of Ethereum on the market. And everyone's going to want it. Everyone's going to look for it. It's the easiest, it's one of the easiest assets to buy. You can buy it on a PayPal. Like anywhere you can buy Bitcoin, you can buy Ethereum nowadays. And so it's very retail friendly. There's real use cases. So I think it appeals to a broader audience that are outside of like this, like, hey, I like Bitcoin. Like personally. I don't really have any Bitcoin in my portfolio, to be totally frank. It's like I think I'm starting to get more excited, but if I'm going to invest in the ecosystem, I'm probably going to invest in like, some of these layer twos, ordinals, like some of these more high beta things. I think you're finally starting to get Bitcoin beta, which is going to pull away from some of the potential of Bitcoin growth, is like when you have that beta. And I think there's a ton of Ethereum beta too. I don't know how well it's going to perform because a lot of the beta doesn't necessarily, get that same exposure as like the actual vanilla ETH. And so you have staking, liquid staking, you have restaking, you have like Blast and other L2s like that, and then you have 4844. And then just the eigenlayer narrative as a whole, I think it's something that traditional financial infrastructure is going to like once it clicks for them, because I think it's pretty intuitive that you can export the trust of potentially 800,000 validators. How many of those are actual like individual solo validators are interesting? But like, hey, I'm telling everyone right now, like I think buying a DApp node and running a node, and like, I'm not, like I'm not a dev by trade, but I run a DApp node at home. I think it's incredibly important. Everybody should run a DApp node at home. And I think once you get restaking, it's going to be a lot more realistic. It's going to be a lot more, it's going to be easier, and it's going to be a lot more financially beneficial to be running a node at home. The ability to export 800,000 nodes of trust, or, whatever fraction of people that are actually going to restake, is a like real 0 to 1 innovation that I don't think the world's ready for. So that was just my Ethereum, bull case.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm incredibly bullish as well. And I do also think Ethereum's going to outperform Bitcoin in the near term, leading up to the Ethereum ETF. If not in May, then yeah, Q3, Q4. It's got to be a done deal. So it's very exciting. Thank you for that sort of alpha on some of the beta areas and Eigenlayer. I think a lot of people need to still look into that. And realize that the value potential there. We've covered the past, the present, the future, all great insights, so much to digest. It's all the time that we have for this episode, Ishan, but I would love to have you back on the show in the near future. And I'm wishing you all the best for SCRIB and all the innovations that you're working on and you're dealing with in crypto. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the time, Ashton. I mean, it was fun. It's just nice to get out there and, put on my bull hat a little bit. But yeah, I appreciate the time.